Hey guys, welcome back. I'm going to block sand and paint the trunk lid, the hood, and the front windshield wiper cowl today. I'm not worried about the bottom sides today. I'm going to paint the tops only, laying flat, so that the metallic lays out the same as it did on the top of the fenders and the same as it's going to do on the top of the quarter panels. So I'm going to leave these flat. I'm going to paint them flat. It's going to get some dirt in it because they are going to be flat. It's a big surface area that dirt can fall on. The underside, a few days after I'm done painting the top side, I'll tape off the top side and we'll probably just hang it in the spray booth. Hang it up on end and we'll paint the underside. Same thing with the hood. The hood's satin black on this car, so that's really easy to do. This is obviously the bottom of the trunk lid's body color. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to guide coat and block sand this with 180 first. I'm not going to go crazy videoing me doing the whole thing because you guys have already seen me do it. So I'm just going to put some guide coat on this trunk lid. We'll knock it down real quick with some 180 and see what it looks like. Because this was just DA sanded down. I have no idea how flat this is. It felt pretty flat, but sometimes when something feels flat, it's not. Especially the hood and trunk lid, I've learned to not push hard at all, because if you push hard on this, see that? They flex. And then if you're pushing real hard and you're flexing the metal, you're doing no good, because you're just going to end up with ripples in the end because you flexed it to the point where you've sanded here and here and not so much in the middle. You know what I mean? You're going to create waves in your 2K primer. So kind of just let it glide on the surface. It's cold today in Ohio. I don't even think it's 50 degrees out. It's nice for sanding, but that's about it. You can see we have like a low spot here, a low spot there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to block sand the rest of this side down with 180. I'll come back and show you what this side looks like. Okay, here's what we have on this side. We got two little dimples there I got to get out still. This was clearly a high spot, which is flat now. But it didn't go all the way through to the metal. Basically nothing on this side went through to the metal. This right here was a low spot. You can see where the primer still is. And then I had to sand around it to get rid of that low spot. Now, on this side, I just took the block real quickly and went over it with no guide coat. Just to show you that you can do it without guide coat, especially if you have a dark gray primer. Because as soon as you start sanding the dark gray primer, it's gonna show light. Now, see all these imperfections everywhere? If you were to just take a DA sander and knock this down and paint it, you're going to see all that stuff in your paint job. All that's going to show through. Average person probably wouldn't see it, but somebody who's doing painting and stuff would definitely see all that. And that's the main reason why it's always good to block sand your panels down rather than using a DA sander. Now, let's say you block this with 180 and you're really good with your DA, you could 320 this down with the DA sander, but you got to make sure you keep that pad flat on the surface. You cannot teeter it at all. Any teetering in that pad is going to cause a dip in the bodywork. So your best bet's to just do it all by hand and just take your time. That took me about 15 minutes or so to knock that down. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this side up and see what it looks like. Okay, the top blocked out really well. I think it should look pretty darn good when it's painted. Tiny bit of lows right there, which I'll get out with my 320. I did find a crease. There's a little crease right here. So now I had to spread a decent amount of that glazing putty. So what I'm probably going to have to do there is double coat the epoxy primer on that spot. And then what I'll do is let the epoxy primer dry for 45 minutes to an hour, and then I'll probably 600 grit wet sand it. The reason why I'll probably end up 600 grit wet sanding it is you're probably going to see a shadow around that body filler area because I had to put so much on. So that's just another little trick to try to get you through without having to do more 2K primer. So you just let your sealer dry, you get 2 good heavy coats on it, and then you 600 wet sand it, and that usually takes care of the problem. So all right, I'm gonna get this trunk lid 320 sanded down, get it in this blown off and in the spray booth, then I'm gonna start blocking the hood down. I'm not sanding the underside of the trunk lid right now or the hood. I usually do, but I just end up getting overspray on it, and I don't feel like taping it off, to be honest with you. So I'm gonna just paint the tops, let it dry for a few days. I'll just scuff the underside up. I'm not going crazy on the underside. We're not building a show car here. So I'll just give it a good scuffing with some Scotch-Brite pads and a little bit of 320 grit, you know, before I paint the underside. So, all right, I'm gonna get this 320, get it in the spray booth, and then I'll start blocking on the hood, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, I lightly knocked down the hood so I can show you all the imperfections. All the minor imperfections, I shouldn't say big ones. But once again, this is why it is so important to block these things down with a block sander. And you got to do it by hand. I've tried air, I've tried every method, nothing works. Now these new blocks that are out, these acrylic blocks, are supposedly the shit. I have not bought a set yet. I do plan on buying a set. I just haven't gotten around to it, to be honest with you. I'm still using the old Durablocks, which are dense foam, which they definitely won't block down as well as the acrylics because they're, you know, they got a little bit of give to them. Anytime you have a little bit of give in anything you use to sand, you're going to get a little bit of, you know, rippliness. I definitely think that those acrylic blocks work really well, especially for like hoods and trunk lids. Something that's a big, huge, flat surface. You know, something that block can just lay down nice and flat and glide along it. I will order a set eventually here when I get a chance. But this is just what it looks like right now. Once again, if you DA this, you know, if you go right from the 2K primer to 320 DA, this is what you're going to get. You know, I don't really think you're going to be able to get that out. So, all right, I'm going to get this block sanded down. It looks like everything's going to come out. I don't think I'm going to have to do any body work on this. So I'm going to go ahead and get this done, and I'll be back. All right, guys, the parts are in the spray booth. I was letting it warm up in there. I've already waxed and grease removed them, and I tack cloth and blown them off a couple times. It's currently 80 degrees in there. I'm going to let it get a little bit warmer just to make sure that that metal is up to temperature, because it was outside and it's like 48 degrees outside, and clearly, you know, the metal is 48 degrees as well. Dust everywhere. I'm not going to put on my suit right now. I'm just going to put epoxy primer on it, let it set, go eat lunch, take my time. I'm going to let it set for an hour or two, come back, and I want to check and see if I need to wet sand those areas, which I'm very confident I'm going to have to do that. So I'm going to do a first coat of epoxy primer just on those spots first. So I'm going to hit those spots, let it dry for a couple minutes, and then come back and put a coat on the whole entire panel. So I've been mixing this for about 10 minutes now, so this is ready to go. I use a epoxy primer from Omni, which is just a cheap PPG version. I've been using it for years. I've used the DP primer as well. I don't have any issues with this. I've never had a problem with it. Some people, you know, it's junk, can't use that. I don't have any problems with it. It does recommend acetone for a thinner. I've used urethane paint thinner for 20 years in it and never had an issue with it. I have used acetone before, but I've never had a problem with the urethane reducer, so I don't know why it really matters. But that's just how I do it. I'm not saying that it's correct by any means, but knock on wood, I haven't had a problem with it. So I just kind of keep doing it the same way I do it. The reason why I put some reducer in it is to thin it out, to let it lay down better. Because it's used as I'm using it as a sealer. I'm not trying to make a high build. Where the heck did I put the lid? A high build epoxy, because I literally have like one metal spot showing on these two panels the size of a dime. Okay, I need mixing stick. So I gotta get this mixed up here. And we're gonna go hit those spots first, and then we will put a coat on the whole panel, and then I'm just gonna let it dry for a while. The reason why I'm heating up those panels a little bit more is that it'll help this stuff dry faster while I walk away from it for a while. It can just sit there with warm metal and help it cure quicker. You have like 24 hours or 72 hours, I'd have to look at the paper, before you have to sand and recoat the epoxy. So I'm not worried about it. We have plenty of time. Take an hour or so off, come back and wet sand it if we need to, and start putting on the color. I'm curious to see how these are going to turn out dirt wise. I do paint a lot of things hanging up, so these two are definitely laying down, so we're going to see how we can do with dirt. Try to just keep tack clothing it, keep blowing it off, and see what we come up with. So alright, I'm going to get this loaded into the gun here, and we're going to go out there, hit those spots, and then we'll wait a couple minutes and then we'll put a coat on all of it. Okay, I just blew everything off one more time. It's 90 degrees in here right now, which is good. So I'm going to put a coat on the bare metal piece first. Then put my respirator on. Okay, I'm gonna let that set for about 10 minutes. Come back and we will put a coat on all of it. I might have to mix up some more. I don't know if I made enough or not. All right, I'm getting ready to put the second coat on the whole panel now. Let me show you what I was talking about. My gloves stuck. Hold on. All right. This is what I'm talking about. See that? If I paint over that, you're gonna see that in the base coat. You're gonna see it in the clear. It's gonna look like shit. So now I'm gonna put a second coat on this whole panel, and that's why I want this to dry. Because then I'm going to take some 600 grit wet sandpaper with a block and just block that down and feather out those tiny little edges of where I went through with that body work. So that's the whole reason why I'm doing this, is to avoid seeing that in the final paint. Especially on the hood and the trunk lid, it's going to look horrible. Just made it on that epoxy primer. So, all right, I'm gonna let this set now. Now, when I paint the hood and trunk lid, as you can see, I start at one edge and then I work my way to the center, and then I walk around, and then I go from the center to the other edge. Because you always want to try to keep a wet line. You know, if you go from the edge to the center and then you go on the other side and go from the edge to the center, by the time you get to the center on the other side, you're now blowing overspray on the other side where it's already drying. So you want to try to keep that wet edge going. So all right, I'll be back in a little while and we will continue on. Now you can sort of see it in the light. You can see the rings, and that's what I want to try to avoid. So we'll let that dry now. Okay, it's been about 2 hours since I put that epoxy primer on there. I'm going to take a paint stick here and wrap it in some 500 grit. And we're going to go sand down those areas that I don't like the look of. Let me see if I can show it to you. See that? You see all the individual rings from the layers that I sanded through. I grabbed 500. I think I'm out of 600. I didn't really look that good, but 500 should be just fine. There's a little soapy water. Basically, that's all I'm doing is using this as a filler primer, and I'm just blocking out those rings to just flatten this area out. Grab a towel so I can wipe that off. Okay, I no longer see those rings. So, hopefully, that'll be alright now, and we won't see those. Hopefully they don't shrink back and you see them again. I don't think it will, but you never know. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the trunk lid, that spot on the back of the trunk lid, and then after that I'm going to tack cloth these off, blow them off again, and then we'll be ready to start putting down the color. Okay, now we can start mixing up the color. Remember, this is a 2-to-1 mix versus the normal base coat, which is a 1-to-1 mix. We're going to stir this for a couple minutes. Use my stir stick that I used last time. Just got done wiping down the parts. Remember, we did 3 coats of this color on the last panels, the doors and fenders. So we're going to do 3 coats of color again. You want to really make sure that you mix this well, and you always drag your stick along the bottom there, because these metallics will sit at the bottom of the can. And like if you mix a paint that's been sitting for months, as soon as you start dragging along the bottom of this can and you pull it up, you'll have a big like clump of metallic. So it's really important that you get these metallics mixed up well, So now I'm going to get a container mixed up, 2-to-1 mix, and then we're going to go out there and get this first coat of color on those parts.
Okay.
Two more coats to go. We'll let that dry for 10 minutes. I'm going to mix up another batch and we'll head out there and do the second coat. rid of there. So I need to let this set for a little bit. This is what I was talking about how the epoxy primer helps from that happening, but it doesn't always prevent it from happening. So as you can see, that edge right there lifted a little bit. So now I need to let this set for probably 20 minutes. And I'm going to take some of that 500 grit sandpaper and I'm going to sand down that lifted area. And then we're going to mist more coats of color over that area only at first before we go putting our final coat on. So I'm going to sand it, and then we're going to take this and dust it. Just keep dusting on a couple coats until we get that to hide. So luckily that's the only spot that has done that so far on this whole project. But that's where you run into the problems of having old lacquer paint with new urethane products. It'll do that sometimes, and that's a prime example, but we'll get it fixed. The red oxide primer underneath. let that dry for a good 15 minutes. Get the gun cleaned out, get ready for clear. I have to tack cloth it off. I saw maybe 2 or 3 pieces of dirt, nothing major. I have right around a half a gallon of color left, which makes about 3/4 of a gallon once it's reduced. What I will do is I will paint the quarter panels and the wheel skirts before I paint the underside of the trunk lid. For some reason I were to run out of paint, I can order a quart of this paint, and if it were a hair off in color, you wouldn't notice it on the bottom side of the trunk lid. But I think we'll be fine. I think we have enough material. Yeah, we're right at a half gallon. We're right about here. So we should be just fine. But just to be on the safe side, we'll do under the trunk lid last. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the gun cleaned and everything, and then I'll be back to start clearing. All right, let's start mixing up the clear. I tack clothed everything off again. There was about 2 or 3 pieces of dirt. So now any dirt that gets on the clear is after I've sprayed the clear. There's nothing sitting on there as of right now, unless something falls in there in the next minute or two, but shouldn't. And we'll see how clean we can get these, seeing that they're laying flat. My hopes are not real high because I know how it goes. Once again, this is a 4-to-1 mix. With 10% reducer. That's how I like to spray it. They don't recommend reducer. I put a little bit in it just to thin it out a little bit. I wouldn't recommend going over 10% because you run the risk of it kind of being dull or drying out on you. That's what I've always noticed. Go out there and get the first coat on. Remember, the first coat, we don't want to go blasting it on there super heavy. We want to kind of just put a nice, good coat on there. And then after that, second coat and third coat, we can put on a little bit heavier. We don't really have any major jams to worry about, so it's not a big deal with that. So I'm going to go ahead and stir this up for the next minute or so, get it in the gun, and we are going to get this first coat of clear put on. Okay, that's our first coat, and you always want to do 75 to 80% overlap. Now, the second coat, putting it on heavier, still going to do 75 to 80% overlap, but I'm going to slow my gun down. I'm not going to move as fast, and that will help lay it down flatter. We have 2 coats left to put on, and then these will be ready. I'm going to take this, save it, and make another batch, because then my third batch I'll use the leftover from this batch, that batch, and add a little more. And we're going to wait 5 to 10 minutes between last coat and this coat. It's already been close to 5 minutes for the trunk lid and the front cowl piece. I'm really liking this paint. I think it works fairly, pretty darn good for what it cost. I have no complaints about it. And then our third coat, we'll wait 10 to 15 minutes rather than 5 to 10 minutes. It's drying pretty quickly. It's close to 80 degrees in there, I think, right now. I have the heater up pretty high. All right, I'm going to get this mixed up real good, and then we are going to get this second coat put on. get the rest of that other clear. Okay, as you can tell, I went through more than a cup of clear. There was a tiny bit left in there, but like I said, once these cups get real low, they get kind of crappy spraying. Now the third coat, I'm not going to put a third coat on the front windshield cowl piece. There's no reason for 3 coats on that. If anybody's going to buff anything on that, it's going to be the 6 inches that are left over on each side of the louvers. So we're not going to mess with that. We're going to save this little bit of clear in case we need it. So we're only going to put a third coat on the hood and the trunk lid. I reuse these sleeves for the whole process. A lot of guys will mix up clear, use it, throw it away, get another one, throw it away, get another one, throw it away. I know they're only about $1 a piece, but I don't really understand why throw it away when you could just fill it up again. So I'm going to get my last batch mixed up here. And we're going to wait 10 minutes more because it's already been about 5 minutes on that trunk lid. Almost went out of order. You got to make sure you mix your stuff in order. If you go out of order, you're going to screw up your whole mix. All right, I'm going to get this mixed up, and we are going to get this third one on in a few minutes here, guys. And then we will see what it looks like. Now on this third coat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray the hood with the third coat nice and slow. And then as soon as I'm done spraying the hood, I'm going to pause the camera. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to dump this little bit of clear that's left into that cup, just to make sure that I have enough to get through the whole trunk lid this time without stopping for a minute between filling it back up. So once I get the hood, we'll pour that little last over into there, and then I know we should be good to finish the trunk lid because I used about half of what was there. And I'm not putting a third coat on that cowl, so we should work out just fine. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry for about 15 minutes and then we can go out there and take a look at it. If you ever see me spraying and you see me doing my patterns and I'm going up and I stop for a second and I go back a little bit, it's because I don't like the way it looks. You know, maybe it looked a little dry. Maybe I didn't hit that 70-80% overlap, and you know, maybe I only hit it at 50%. You can see a little bit of a dry line there. So I'll go back down real quick and hit it with a little bit more clear, just to make sure that it levels out, just so I don't have any dry spots. Now, this is how much clear I have left. That's it. That's all I wasted on these parts, is that little bit. So that's pretty nice. Oh, and by the way, I never told you guys, I'm spraying clear with a old Sada 3000. Once again, all my Sada guns have to be at least 20 years old. And they still work to this day. I'm sure there are better guns out there that would probably result in a better spray out for me. I am considering possibly buying another 1 or 2 guns in the future here. Not sure what I'd get yet. And this gun, I have a 1.3 tip in it rather than a 1.4. I shoot my metallics with a 1.4 and I shoot my clear with a 1.3. The 1.3 atomizes and breaks up the particles a little bit more, which gives it a thinner spray out, you know, because it breaks them up more, so it lays down a little bit flatter. A 1.4 tip's going to load it on a little bit quicker with bigger droplets, and it's going to create more of an orange peel. So I'm going to get this gun cleaned out, and then we'll take a look at the parts and see how they look. All right, let's take a look at them. This was the piece that we sandblasted, epoxy primered it, and painted it with no filler primer, and it's pretty darn smooth. But we had no dents or anything on it too. You know, obviously that would change if you had dents. Everything laid out real good, very, very minimal orange peel, and very few specks of dirt. Not much at all. Call this a scuff and buff. Just scuff the dirt spots and buff it real quick. Very happy with how it looks. 3 more parts that are done, ready to go on the car. So that's all we have left now is the quarter panels, door jambs, trunk jam, back panel, and a couple wheel skirts, and then there's a little panel below the grill. And that's it. Everything will be painted for this car, body color wise. Still have to paint the underside of the trunk lid, the underside of the hood black, the inner wheel wells black. We're going to do all that stuff satin black. And then supposedly I'm getting all new trim for this car. It's supposed to be here next week. So I don't know if it's new or been polished, fixed and polished. My guess is probably fixed and polished. That'll be here next week. So as I put the panels on, I can put the trim on, because you got to put the fender trim on before you put the fenders on and stuff like that. So we'll have a nice shiny paint job with nice new polished trim. It should look really good. I mean, I'm going to basically just knock down the dirt on the trunk lid and hood. Maybe I'll just take 1500 on the DA and just scuff the whole hood real quick and knock the dirt down on that, and then just hit it with a buffer and then be done with that. So that's going to end this part. This weather is horrible. We're having horrible weather in October in Ohio. It's basically raining almost every single day. We've had like 3 days in the past 2-3 weeks of no rain. It's supposed to be crappy again tomorrow. Monday I'm working during the day. Hopefully when I get home from work Monday, we can block sand down. It's supposed to be decent. We can block sand down those spots on the quarter panels and then primer the whole shell of the car, both quarter panels and the tail pan. And then hopefully later in the week I'll get another decent day to where I can get it all blocked down and everything and get it ready for paint. Once I get that shell in here and get it painted, you know, we're at the home stretch then. I want to clean up that front frame and the motor and stuff and just kind of paint that just so it doesn't look like complete crap. and then we can start putting this thing together. Like I said, I'm not going to do a ton of wet sanding and buffing. If you guys are spraying and you're getting a bunch of junk in your paint or pretty orange peely or a bunch of runs and stuff like that, I suggest slowing down, taking a little bit more time in your prep, multiple tack ragging between coats, blow everything off multiple times, really douse it with wax and grease remover. I've noticed that helps tremendously. Really saturate those panels with wax and grease remover. Let it set for a couple minutes before you start wiping it off with a towel. You make sure you use a lint-free towel. That will also help. And the more time you take in the painting process, the less time you have to spend in the wet sanding and buffing process. I hate wet sanding and buffing. I don't know many people that like it. I hate it when you have to take 20-30 hours to wet sand and buff a car, because it's, you know what I mean, you got to really knock it down. I like to just try to go at it quickly and be done with it. That's not always the case. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes you're just having a bad day, or just, you know, things just don't go right, or it shrinks back real bad and you have no choice but to wet sand the crap out of it. But this car has 3 coats of clear on everything, and like I said, anything I do, I'm going to scuff and buff it. Nothing major. The future owner, if they ever want to go over it, they have plenty of clear to do a really nice wet sanding and buff job on it. So, alright guys, that's going to end this video. If you're liking what you see, please like, subscribe, share. Any questions or comments, feel free to ask. Other than that, I will see you guys later.